Hi, so today I just wanted to talk about how I prepared and played in SPL finals. I was played for the Raiders in this tournament. This is SPL 17. I had the fortune of being on the winning team. I got to make playoffs and play in finals, and we ended up succeeding. Um, this is my first ever Small Gun Premier League. Um, To give some background about my RBY career, I've been playing since the beginning of 2023 about. And I've been able to rise very quickly, play in a lot of team tournaments, play against a lot of the best players, and win. And I had the fortune of being drafted to Small Gun Premier League finally, at long last, this year. And I played the full season, never benched. Played 11 sets total. So this game right in front of here is not from finals. I will get to that. We will get to those games later. This is week 1. Why am I showing you this? Because my opponent in finals, Sceptross, was the same opponent I played in week 1. And these games right here, we played 2 games in week 1. I won both. They were very important because they inform a lot about how your opponent will handle you later, both what you bring and what they bring, and obviously the outcome also. So right here, as we see, I brought this Gar Jinx team where I use Gengar in the lead and Jinx in the back, and the idea is that you really want to hit Jinx lead out your opponent using Jinx in the lead, because that way you can explode Gengar immediately and send out your Jinx, and will almost always be able to sleep something else and start you off the game 5-4. In RBY, getting a sleep down it's not exactly an OHKO, but it's extremely good. It puts a Pokemon out of commission for up to like 6 or 7 turns, and that's incredible, and the sleep game is extremely important. And my opponent, Sceptross, I knew for using a lot of Jinx. And even if you don't hit a Jinx, it can still be fine in other ways. If you hit a Gengar lead, you can still click Psychic with your Gengar, force them to deal a lot of damage, and then pivot out to Starmie, or just outright win the matchup. And if you hit a Starmie lead, that's also fine, because Jinx into Starmie lead is pretty easy to do in most cases, because you might be taking a Thunder Wave or a Psychic, and the most they can hurt you with is Psychic or Thunderbolt, and that doesn't do a ton. And you'll usually be able to land Lovely Kiss. The worst case scenario would be they just click Blizzard into your Gengar, they are bluffing Psychic, and then they surf your Jinx. That would be bad, but that's not. Surf Blizzard is not a very common set because Starmie always wants Recover and Thunder Wave pretty much. And you usually want a move that can hit Cloyster or Lapras. You can get away with Surf Blizz. It's definitely a good set. It's usable, but it's not super common for that reason. And Zam lead is definitely the least fun to see, Zam and Tauros lead, but Tauros lead is extremely rare, and Zam lead my opponent did not use a ton of. And so in this team I had Gengar, Starmie, Jinx, as like the main core 3 that aren't my normals. Starmie just because it's good and fast, and it's just nice speed control. It's good against Tauros. And I have Snorlax, Tauros, and Chansey to fill out the last 3, which is pretty standard on a good, like, probably 70% of teams, roughly, on average, you'll see all 3 of those. Then what he used was Gar Egg Me, which is very similar to my team. I just had Jinx instead of Executor. And game 2, I brought Jinx Me Dawn. He also brought Jinx Me Dawn. Jinx lead is good because it gets sleep out very quickly, and pretty reliably. Worst case, you might see a Gengar, and that's pretty bad, but other than that, the worst case, on average, of course, things can go very wrong with Jinx continually missing or getting paralyzed, but largely it's pretty consistent at getting sleep off against Starmie and Alakazam leads, and it has a 50-50 against other Jinx Then Rhydon is a very strong breaker, and this team helps enable it pretty well. Starmie, just because you kind of need it here for Tauros. And then Chansey, Snorlax, Tauros to fill it out. Sceptross used Jinx Don also. He has used that team quite a lot. This style of Jinx, Starmie, 3 normals with no second sleeper. It's definitely the team style he uses the most, and I ended up winning. Is that just some context to shape how I approach finals? And now here we have the scouts for Sceptross. I take prepping pretty seriously. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and so I value these scouts a lot. I take all the statistics from the replays. I put the replays also in case I want to watch them. I just go through them, and I also have my own self-scout right here. This is me, and this is Sceptross. So I'm just going to go down the list and how I like approach it. So I have Pokemon statistics, lead statistics, combos of 6 with leads, and then the move usages for some of the important Pokemon where move variety is common. Main Snorlax, Exeggutor, Snorlax, Chansey, Exeggutor, Starmie are the main 4 I always look at, and then it can help to see others, but these 4 are the main ones where moves are actually consistently going to vary. It's like stuff like Tauros, Jinx, Rhydon. You might see other moves occasionally, but for the most part, they're always going to use the same like core set of like 3 or 4 moves, pretty much. So the main things I look at are like how high relatively are these usages. Chansey is close to 100%. That's fairly normal. Tauros close to 100%. That's if you're not at 100% Tauros or very close to 100%, that would be abnormal. Starmie is above 90%. That's like the first big thing here. It means he's almost always going to use Starmie. He's not going to use it every game, but I would be foolish if I didn't prepare for a Starmie in all 3 games. Snorlax at 87%, that's pretty normal. Exeggutor below 60%, that's also that stands out. He had, I believe, the lowest Exeggutor use out of anyone in the entire tournament. Exeggutor is I believe it's the number 4 Pokemon, and a lot of people think it's also top 4 in somewhere. And generally, you'll see it at least 70%, if not higher, among most players. And the other 2 big standout things from Sceptross, 45% Rhydon and 45% Jinx. Now, and obviously for the record, this is a somewhat smaller sample size. It's like going off like 24, 25 games or so. But these usage stats are fairly consistent with what his stats have been in previous tournaments, and I knew going into finals that it's been working pretty well from him. He was 6-4 at this point, and I didn't think he would deviate too strongly. Especially since a lot of people do like to use Rhydon against me. So, yeah, I mean, Jinx, specifically this SPL, has had a very high usage percent compared to normal. Normally it sits around like 30% or so, 25 to 30%, but this SPL for a lot of players was around like 40%. So it was definitely enjoying a lot of success, and I knew I had to prepare for it, especially since Sceptross himself was one of the biggest users of it. And some other things, Cloyster above 20%, or at 20%, so I needed to be prepared for it. I knew he wouldn't use no Cloyster. And then Zapdos, Gengar, and Alakazam all very low in usage. So I should prepare. So of course, he could bring them. He did bring one against me in week 1, a Gengar. But they're not the biggest things I need to concern about. It's definitely the Rhydon and the Jinx. In lead stats, we see this backed up. Of course, Jinx very high in lead usage, over 40%. I should expect to see it once or twice, at least. And then Starmie at 30%, and then Gengar and Alakazam both very low. But something that is important to note that I see, all Gengars and all Alakazams ended up in the lead. So no Backgar, no Backzam, that's something I can use to my advantage. And then all but one Jinx were in the lead. So that's something I also need to, or I can also mostly not worry about, is seeing a back Jinx from him. And about 7 out of 22 Starmies were in the lead. So he has much more back me, about actually double the amount of back me's as lead me's, but he still does use lead me, and you'll still see like about 1 every set from him, if not 2, but generally about 1 on average. And then, of course, we see in the lead stats, like I said, Jinx Me Dawn, extremely common from him, relatively. And then some other things, Meg Dawn also. So the number 2 most used teams are Rhydon. Number 3 is Garagme, and then some other stuff right here. Next 2 most used, the 2 other teams used more than once were both Jinx Solo Sleep. Jinx Cloy Me and Jinx Me Zap. And going down to lead stats, we have very high self-destruct Snorlax usage and very high and pretty high reflect Snorlax usage. I guess the reflect usage is about average, but the point is that he uses a lot of Boomlax, and he does not really use what's called Fizzlax, which is Snorlax without rest. It's usually Body Slam, Earthquake, Self-Destruct, and then one of Earthquake or Counter. He didn't have a single Counter Lax, and Hyper Beam was only one. And so I knew that pretty much all of his Snorlaxes would be Body Slam, Self-Destruct, Rest, Reflect, Body Slam, Self-Destruct, Earthquake, Rest, which he has used a couple times on a specific team or two, or Body Slam, Earthquake, Reflect, Rest. And so that's definitely a lot of room I can use to bring stuff like possibly Cloyster, if there's an angle for it. Reflect Chansey, Gengar, of course. But yeah, I knew I wouldn't have to really worry about something like Ice Beam Snorlax or seeing a Fizzlax. And Chansey, he has pretty high Bolt Beam usage is the big thing. He does use Sing Toss for sure, but for the most part, it's just limited to Starmie lead teams. Almost everything else from him is going to be Ice Beam and Thunderbolt. And he thinks it's the best Chansey set, and he uses Chansey 95% of the time. So I expected to see 2 or 3 of these. And then if there wasn't all 3 for 3, it would be one Sing Toss Chansey, which would go with a Me Egg team. An Executor, he has very low Executor usage relatively, and for the record, these usage stats are compared to the overall usage of the Pokemon, so 55% or 54% Psychic Executor, that's pretty much all of his Executors. Ended up clicking it, and I know obviously it's always going to run anyways, but it doesn't mean that only 54% of his Executors have Psychic. It just means that 54 out of the 58 percentages of Executors clicked Psychic. Anyways, it's always going to run Psychic, it's always going to run Sleep Powder pretty much. He has used non-Sleep Powder before, but I figured in finals he wouldn't do that, and he was less likely to use Executor by default anyways. And then Stun Spore is pretty high use, and then some Explosion, some Mega Drain, and then like 1 or 2 Rests. So pretty consistent overall. I knew he wouldn't be using normal move Executor, which hits Alakazam, Jinx, Chansey mostly. Mostly Zam and Jinx. And so that means Jinx was extra incentivized if he did happen to use Executor. Here with Starmie's, most of it is Psychic and Blizzard. He has used some Surf plus Blizzard, and there is some Surf plus Thunderbolt, but for the most part, it's all Psychic Blizzard. So I knew that my own Starmie with Thunderbolt would be very good here. I knew that something like Alakazam or Jinx could likely be better than normal because the Starmies aren't using Surf a ton. They are using it some, but it's not a ton. And here are just some miscellaneous things. It's not on the screen, but Rhydon is mostly just Rock Slide. It always runs Body Slam, Earthquake, Body Slam, Earthquake, Substitute pretty much, and then it usually runs Rock Slide in the last move, but it can swap it out for Leer or Rest. And he was mostly Rock Slide. Anyways, then we see, it's also not on the screen, but Jinx is mostly is all Blizzard Psychic Rest level because I believe he did use Body Slam one time, but then he swore off of it because he ended up losing for not having Psychic. So I knew I wouldn't have to worry about Body Slam Jinx, which is, it's pretty uncommon, but it's a consideration. It paralyzes Starmie. That's pretty much it. It's kind of good in certain scenarios. And then Tauros, Sun Thunderbolt, so here's the thing, I knew a lot about what teams he liked to use already, like the exact sets of his teams. So seeing something like 3 Thunderbolt Tauroses out of 24 or whatever, I wasn't really thinking about that too much because I knew what teams it would and would not show up on. Like he would use Thunderbolt with Rhydon teams much more than without. Or Thunderbolt on Jinx Me Cloy, for example. anyways, that's a lot to parse over, and so for my self-scout, I'll just quickly go over this since it's a little less important. It's still definitely important, but I was definitely thinking more about what he was bringing than what I should bring to counter his brings to what I brought, if that makes sense. So my chansey usage is lower than his, 80% roughly. My executor usage is much higher, 77% as opposed to 58%. My Starmie usage is 65%, which is actually relatively kind of low. There are a lot of players who use it at like an 80 or 90% clip. I'm not one of those players. I use it roughly 55 to 65% of the time, and this is consistent with that. My Jinx usage is still pretty high compared to like normal rates, but definitely lower than his. Rhydon lower, and then more Alakazam and Zapdos and Gengar, and one more Cloyster. My lead usages are much more varied than his, much more spread out. Roughly even split between Jinx, Starmie, and Alakazam, and then some Gengar, while he had vast majority Jinx. My most common team I brought was Miyagdon, and then a lot of variety here. Only one other team that got used more than once, which was Big Six, Zamigme, plus normals. And every other team was unique, but I wasn't really... I knew he'd want to prepare for Miyagdon, but other than that, not a whole lot to do. I use a lot less Reflect Snorlax. I have a lot more Fizzlax. You can see 4 counters right here, 4 Hyper Beams. Still use Self-Destruct a good amount, but definitely not 67% of the time or whatever his was. Chansey, I use a lot more Sing Toss. I think it's the best Chansey set personally. Gives a lot of flexibility with how you like to build a team. Less Thunderbolt, and then only 1 Reflect, and I never used Counter Chansey this season. I only brought Reflect like once or twice also. Though I do think it's good. So we have, and then with Executor, it's mostly Stun Spore. Then like 1 or 2 like other moves, but for the large part, it's Stun Spore. My Starmie actually had a lot of Psychic and Blizzard use. There we go. Had a lot of Psychic and Blizzard use. Actually, a lot lower Thunderbolt than I normally use on my Starmies, but I still had a lot of Surf. I did use Surf Bolt some. Don't always click Thunderbolt. It's mostly for other Starmie. And then like 1 or 2 Surf Blizzards maybe. I don't think I even used Blizzbolt Starmie this season. Maybe once, which has not been the case for me in other tournaments before this. So how do I actually approach this once I'm done parsing the information? Actually, there's one more thing I need to quickly address. So I took this finals much more seriously for prep. I mean, I still took my prep seriously during the regular season, but this one I definitely amped it up a notch. So something I looked at was the specific game placements of his Pokemon usages. Like, what games does he use these Pokemon more than other games in terms of like order in the set, like game 1, game 2, game 3. And then I ended up looking and seeing that he had Jinx 6 out of 10, out of 6 times out of his 10 game 1s he played this season before finals, had a Jinx lead, while his overall Jinx lead is only 45%. That means he was using Jinx in game 1 much more than he brought it in other games. Sorry, that's game 1. Sorry, I meant game 2. So he was using Jinx in game 2 much more than in game 1 and game 3. Similarly, Rhydon, also at 45%. He brought it in 6 out of his 10 game 1s, which meant he was using Rhydon in game 1 more than in game 2 or game 3. It's just something to think about. It doesn't, it's not a doctrine, it does not a guarantee, but it does mean I'm potentially looking to punish those matchups harder in game 1 and game 2 than otherwise. That doesn't necessarily change what teams I'm going to use, but it does change what order I'm going to use those teams in, which I do think matters. So going into this week, so for the record, I had Serpy in my team court helping me out for playoffs. Serpy is the best RBY player currently. He's one of the best players of all time, and he consistently dominates pretty much every tournament he plays. He was the most expensive RBY player in the draft by a long shot. He was almost 27,000 credits. I was 10.5k, which is a lot for a rookie. And so one of the things he told me about before this week, we had a break week between semifinals and finals because there was a tiebreaker in semifinals. One of the teams he recommended to me was Guard Jinx Me Zap. So I used a Guard Jinx Me team against Sceptross in week 1, but it was Chansey. This is the team he recommended me to use. Okay, so the idea is very similar to the Guard Jinx Me Chansey team. You're hoping to see a Jinx lead, you explode on it with Gengar, you immediately resleep with Jinx, and then you're way ahead. But this one is a much more offensive angle with Zapdos instead of Chansey. Chansey is much more balanced, it's defensive, you take the game slower, and you position your Snorlax and your Tauros. But this one is just going to be very aggressive and end the game quickly and sweep, basically. And the reasons I use it in finals are very similar to in week 1 why I brought Guard Jinx. It's because he has a lot of Jinx lead. And Gengar is also still good. Even if I don't lane the matchup, it's still useful against his Snorlaxes, which run a lot of self-destruct. And the team generally has good breaking power. And I knew, Jinx Me Dom is the team he was using a lot. I did not want to not be prepared for it. Of course, Zapdos is still risking some in the Jinx Me Dom matchup because Zapdos is useless against Rhydon, but if I could force Rhydon out of the way quickly enough with my Snorlax or Tauros, then that would be quite good. Do that, actually. Okay. So, going over the specific move choices. Psychic and Nightshade on Gengar is the attacks. It always runs Hypnosis and Explosion pretty much. But the other two moves are, you pick 2 of Thunderbolt, Nightshade, and Psychic. So I knew I wanted Nightshade because it's just a really good move for hitting Exeggutor mainly. It does a lot of damage to Exeggutor, 25% of its health, and that forces Exeggutor to make a lot of decisions quickly. While if you have Thunderbolt and Psychic, you cannot really hurt it, and it can do pretty much whatever in front of Gengar. So I knew I wanted Nightshade. Even though he has lower Exeggutor usage, it's still a good move to have, and it's always does something. But Psychic versus Thunderbolt was a little more interesting. I ended up going with Psychic. Thunderbolt is more common. Thunderbolt is what I generally prefer, but Psychic I felt was better in this matchup because it hits Rhydon pretty hard. It hits his Gengars in the lead, which helps out Jinx and my Starmie, and Zapdos. Help chip his Gengar down and force it to possibly explode earlier than it wants to, or just outright kill it. It hits Rhydon a lot harder than Nightshade. Nightshade doesn't even break Rhydon substitute, but Psychic does 33% and can do a lot more if it crits. And Psychic can also do special drops, which is nice to help out Starmie and Snorlax and Jinx. Psychic also hits Snorlax better than, or it actually is weaker than Thunderbolt, so it does less directly, but it can drop special, which is very important for not getting rest looped by Snorlax. You can still, Thunderbolt is still fine against Snorlax. You can force it to rest and then bring in your Starmie or Zapdos, but Psychic, it does it more directly, and it also, again, does not thud into Rhydon, which is immune to Thunderbolt. And then on Jinx, normally it runs Lovely Kiss, Blizzard, Rest, Psychic. However, this time I chose to run Body Slam because I knew if I was playing with Gengar against a Jinx lead team, how it would go, I'd expect is something like Gengar explodes on Jinx, his Jinx is gone, send in my Jinx, and either sleep Starmie, which is incredible for me, or I sleep his Chansey or Exeggutor, and then I Body Slam his Starmie coming in. and that would paralyze it and set me up very, very nicely for Zapdos, Snorlax, and Tauros to win the game. And I didn't feel like I needed Psychic super strongly. This team wants to go very fast. Obviously, it's nice to hit Chansey and to hit Cloyster, but for Cloyster, I have a Starmie and a Zapdos. I don't really care about it that much, and it's not like Cloyster can really hurt Jinx too badly anyways. And for Chansey, well, most of the time I'd probably be sleeping it or exploding on it, and as long as I paralyze the Chansey, or even free with Starmie's Thunder Wave, or even just paralyze it, or even just freeze it with Jinx directly with Blizzard, that would be great. So I didn't feel like I needed Psychics too strongly. On Starmie, I went with Psychic and Blizzard. Thunderbolt was definitely a consideration. It's definitely very good in this matchup, but Serpy recommended to use Psychic and Blizzard on this team because it's a good cleaner, and I have Gengar and Jinx to. Sorry, I have Jinx to usually sleep Starmie, and I have Snorlax with Self-Destruct that can blow up on Starmie. I have a Zapdos that can abuse a paralyzed Starmie, and worst case, my Starmie just PP stalls his Starmie, and we just sit there doing nothing. Then I can use it to position later. So I was perfectly happy with just paralyzing his Starmie to set up for my other Pokemon. I didn't feel like I needed Thunderbolt too strongly on this team. Zapdos, ideally I don't see a Rhydon, and like I said, he had more Rhydons in Game 1 than Game 2. And more Jinx in Game 2 than in Game 1. So I did end up using this team in Game 2. I designated it for my Game 2. And so this was targeted, and this was built to target that high Jinx usage in Game 2 and lower Rhydon usage outside of Game 1. And Zapdos is very strong. It can sweep endgames really easily. It's a lot of power against Starmie and Cloyster. It's very demanding, and it helps against Tauros also. Normally on Chansey list teams, you don't see Reflect Rest Snorlax, and normally I don't think I've ever run Reflect Rest Snorlax on a team without Chansey on it, but on this team specifically, in this matchup, I knew he had a lot of Bolt Beam Chansey, and he'd likely be. So as I was saying, sorry, I had to cut away. Anyways, I knew he had a lot of Bolt Beam Chansey, so I wanted Reflect Snorlax on this team, and I felt like I could get away with not having Earthquake or counter Hyper Beam. No counter is perfectly fine, because I have Gengar and Starmie to help ease off the, to help deal with other Snorlax, and also my Snorlax is self-destruct and reflect anyways, so it's still okay at switching into Tauros out of the lead. And then Hyper Beam is skippable in general. It's obviously a good move to have, but I need it here. And Earthquake, Earthquake is definitely the one that's most probably taxing to drop on this team with Zapdos, but Reflect is still good at baiting in Rhydon, and it can force it, if it has Rest, it can force it to sleep, and if it does not have Rest, it's usually Rock Slide. And in that case, Reflect Snorlax can potentially just straight up 1v1 it. Obviously, it can go wrong with crits, but it's doable. And then Leer Rhydon is just not very common right now, especially from my opponent. And so, overall, that's the team. This definitely was easier to, it's one team out of the way, definitely easy for me because I already went into this week knowing I'd likely want to use this team. Obviously, I did not make myself beholden to using it, but I looked at the matchup and figured, yeah, this is a pretty good situation to use it in, and it looks like it could do very well. So, but now I have to actually create my own teams for the other two games, since I didn't know quite yet what I wanted to use. And so if we look back at the scout, very high Jinx from him, and very high Rhydon from him, and pretty low Executor. And also, if you notice right here, very low Gengar, pretty much. And so I had in my mind that I'd probably want to use a Jinx B Dawn again, just like I did in week 1, because he had very little in his scout that could punish it. Garigme would be a rough matchup, but other than that, there's pretty much nothing. I'm almost always going to get a 50-50 or better, especially if I make my sets in a certain way. And then myself in this tournament, I'd only used Jinx Me Dawn, I believe, one time. Also, yeah, right here. And that was back in week 1. I had not brought Jinx Me Dawn since week 1. And it just seemed very good here, especially. And if you look down here, like I said, he is mostly self-destruct Snorlax, and so that makes Rhydon even better. And so I did end up deciding to use Jinx Me Dawn. But the problem is, what sets do you use? Because there's a lot you can do with the sets on Chansey, Snorlax, Starmie, and even Rhydon. So I ended up going with these sets. Jinx is a pretty normal set. Blizzard Psychic Rest did not feel like I needed to use Body Slam if I was using lead Jinx. It just runs Psychic and hit the stun. Special drop Chansey, possibly. But the rest is more, there's more nuance to it. I ended up going with Surf Bolt on Starmie. That's because he had a ton of his own Starmie use and very low Executor usage. And so that makes me want to have Thunderbolt on Starmie, and I felt like I could use a stab move and not Blizzard because a stab move is really important to hit Snorlax and Tauros. In this case, it's Surf over Psychic because of the Jinx and Rhydon usage. And also, I just think Surf Bolt is overall superior to Psychic Thunderbolt. But again, especially in this matchup where, if my Starmie cannot OHKO Rhydon or 3-hit KO Jinx, then that's pretty bad. And so Surf Bolt felt fairly obvious here, but the rest took a little more thought. I ended up going with Ice Beam and Thunderbolt on Chansey. I did consider Counter. I considered Sing, but I felt like in this matchup, when I'm playing, most likely going to be seeing a Jinx solo sleep team from him or a Mieg team, then I wouldn't need Sing Chansey too much because Jinx should be pretty reliable at getting the sleep off, or either that or I lose the Jinx speed tie and then my Ice Beam Sing Chansey is just not really hurting his Jinx at all. And that's not amazing. And I looked at Counter, but when I was looking through his replays, there were 3 times at least. I didn't watch every single replay, but I watched up to like week 7 or 8 or something. When he had Snorlax unparalyzed in front of an opponent's paralyzed Chansey, he clicked Reflect all 3 times in situations where clicking Body Slam would have been extremely good, meaning he definitely did scout for counter Chansey even when he was using Monolax, where counter should be very good. And a lot of the times he has been known to just self-destruct his Snorlax on the Chansey to help clear the way for his Starmie. And I'm like, I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to give him a free turn basically trying to pull off a counter when it probably won't work. So I'm just going to run Thunderbolt to hit Starmie. And so Ice Beam Thunderbolt gives Chansey pretty much perfect coverage, and it's excellent in this matchup. Then on Snorlax, I ended up it was Tauros first that I feel like that I decided. I decided to go with Blizzard and Thunderbolt on Tauros because I feel like I didn't need Earthquake too much. He doesn't really run counter on his Snorlaxes. He doesn't. Actually, Blizzard is better for that anyways, but the point being is he doesn't really run Gengar too much. And even if he does, I have a Rhydon, and I ended up putting Earthquake on Snorlax. But also, if I'm using Jinx, I mean, obviously this isn't always the best mindset to have, but in this matchup specifically, I felt like I could get away with it. If I'm using Jinx in Game 1, I probably don't need Earthquake on Tauros too much. Obviously, it's still a good move to have for other situations, but I already don't want to see a Gengar, and if I do see a Gengar, I have ways around it with Rhydon. Um, he doesn't use counter on Chansey either, is the other main thing for Earthquake Tauros. And Thunderbolt ended up being, or I don't think it ended up being used at all, but it's just a good move to have because he did use Cloyster a couple times. Um, One of the teams that he did use a few times was Jinx Me Cloy, which has a pretty good matchup against this team because Cloyster and Starmie is pretty harsh for Rhydon to see. Rhydon still has use in the matchup, but it's not amazing. And Thunderbolt will just completely destroy Cloyster. I mean, obviously, if it's Starmie, that beats Cloyster anyways, but Thunderbolt can actually Thunderbolt Tauros will actually kill Cloyster much more consistently than Starmie, where Cloyster would want to switch out. And that would, killing Cloyster would be really big for Snorlax and Rhydon. Then with Blizzard Thunderbolt Tauros, you usually do want Earthquake on Snorlax. I mean, there is a world where you could not run Earthquake on either of your normals, but I would not really recommend that at all. Like, because if you do see a Gengar, then that's really, really bad. And I already kind of wanted Earthquake on Snorlax for this matchup anyways, because I knew he would be heavily incentivized to use Rhydon against me, since he was using it so much and doing pretty well, and he in previous tournaments to SPL, I had much lower usage during this SPL, but previous tournaments to SPL, I had like 40% Zapdos and Gengar usage, and that resulted in everyone and their mother trying to spam Rhydon against me. It's very annoying. Yeah, I just thought Earthquake Snorlax would be nice to have to prevent Rhydon shenanigans, and it hits Gengar if it does show up, which is pretty important for Tauros. And also, it's just like good to have to be able to kill Gengar. Self-destruct definitely it was a consideration, and then running Earthquake on Tauros instead of Thunderbolt, but I felt like I was confident enough in being able to handle his Tauros that I would be able to use Earthquake on Snorlax, because I just needed to chip Tauros down enough for Rhydon and my own Tauros to be able to win. I did not need my Snorlax to be the win condition, and to make up for also not having self-destruct for his Snorlax if things got precarious, Serpy recommended to put Rest on Rhydon, and I ended up really liking it. The reason Rest is good here is because, well, having Earthquake, Body Slam, Reflect, Rest on my Snorlax means that if he gets his Snorlax in on the field and my Snorlax is resting or lower on HP, then I'd have to send my own Rhydon in likely, and if I get paralyzed by Body Slam, that's really bad. But Rest would allow me to heal that off, and that would be very, very useful. And so Rest kind of lets me, like, I guess, cheat against other Snorlax, basically. And this is how the team ended up coming together, and I really think it's pretty good. It does have some issues against Tauros, more so than Jinx Me might normally have, because Snorlax lacks self-destruct, and Rhydon clicking Rest can give Tauros entry, but I think it's playable if you keep up the momentum, and as long as you're able to hit Tauros some. But the last team took some more thought. I knew I wanted to use a Gengar in Game 2 because of the high Jinx usage in Game 2 relative to Game 1 and Game 3. But I didn't know if that meant using Gar Jinx Me Zap in Game 2 and making a second Gengar team in Game 3, or using Gar Jinx Me Zap in Game 1 and making a second Gengar team for Game 2. Let me see one second. But yeah, I did decide I did want to use a second Gengar team because of his Jinx usage. sorry. Ultimately, I ended up deciding I'd rather have Jinx be down in game 1 and a Zapdos weak team, aka a team without Ride on it in game 3. Cirby recommended that, and I agreed with it, because seeing a Ride on in game 3 from him would likely be what he'd be bringing, because it's his comfort bring, and it's gonna get him a playable matchup pretty much no matter what. So I knew I needed to hedge for to see that I'd be seeing a Ride on in game 3. So I moved Jinx Mizap up to game 2 and Jinx Don up to game 1. And then game 3, I needed another Gengar team. I was going over, there were a few options. I considered running another Jinx team, just like game 2. But ultimately, I decided if it was game 3, I'd want to have Chansey. I wouldn't want to risk anything. And obviously, I understand that, it's not inherently a risk to go Chansey-less, and it's perfectly good, but I wanted that sense of security, especially against one of his, like, quote-unquote, like, safe brings, like Miagdon or Jinxmidon. So what I ended up deciding was, if I'm using Gengar with Chansey in a game 3, there's only one team it could really be, and that's Garigme. This is like the most like basic Gar Egg Chansey team. It's probably the best Gengar team. I don't know. I think that saying that's kind of useless anyways, but whatever. And so Garigme is just really, really crushing if I see a Jinx Don from him. Or just any kind of Jinx team, frankly, but especially Jinx Don. Jinx Zap and Jinx Egg Zap could get a little rough, but they're still playable. And Jinx plus not Zapdos is extremely good. Doubling up on the Gengar in Game 2 and Game 3 also helps me, because Game 1 my strategy is to just explode Gengar on Jinx. If I see a Jinx in the lead matchup, but in Game 3, if he does double up on Jinx, then I'm not going to explode with my Gengar, because this team is not quite that aggressive. You still could do it, definitely, but the idea was to like condition him, sort of. For Game 2, I'm exploding Gengar on Jinx, but Game 3, I'm not going to, so potentially I could catch a switch from him, trying to catch the explosion, and then end up clicking Hypnosis into his Starmie or his Rhydon or something. And that would put me way ahead. And it's also still very good, fine if I see a Starmie lead from him. Obviously, it's not amazing. Gengar Executor does not love to see a Psychic Blizzard Starmie out of the lead, but that's what Sing Chansey is for, in fact. And that's why I use Sing Chansey on this team, because I wanted that security of the Triple Sleep. I think Triple Sleep is actually really, really strong. It's very comfortable to play with for me, also. It pretty much fixes any issues Gengar lead has running Sing on Chansey, in my opinion, and I like to do it a lot. And I think it works well here also because he runs so much Jinx solo sleep that I can just like go boom, boom, boom with Gengar and Executor and still have sleep available later in the game on Chansey. And so as for the sets, actually just a little more. Starmie is just like really, the reason I went with this instead of a different Gengar team, or Gengar Executor Chansey team, is just because Starmie has so much security with the speed control and being extra proof against Rhydon. And I feel like, again, I didn't know for sure, obviously, but I was really expecting to see a Rhydon in Game 3 above anything else. And even if I didn't see a Rhydon, I knew having Starmie would still be very nice to have. And Starmie helps against Snorlax and Tauros a lot, and it's also shut down against Cloyster. So I know I wanted it. As for the sets, we have Psychic Shade on Gengar again. I didn't see a reason to deviate too hard from running Side Shade in Game 2. It just seemed good to have. Pretty much the same reasons. Executor was I knew definitely going to be Sunspore. Sunspore is very important for paralyzing Chansey and Starmie. And his Executor, if he did use one. And then Sleep Powder, Psychic Explosion are very standard. And a new Executor would be pretty important to have here to really help enable my Starmie and just in general do a lot of damage. Starmie was Surf Bolt again, same reason as Game 1, as the Jinx Me Dawn team pretty much. There's very little punish he had to Surf Bolt, and in this case especially I needed Thunderbolt on Starmie because Gengar, Executor, Chansey all don't have a move that can hit Starmie too hard. I mean, obviously Executor and Gengar have Explosion, but I would need to paralyze it first in most cases for that to really do a whole lot. And I wanted a way to actually be able to kill Starmie, his Starmie, if either Executor and Gengar died or I wanted to force it out without having to explode my Executor or Gengar. And then Self-Destruct on Snorlax. I did consider Ice Beam here. I actually ran Ice Beam on Garagme in semifinals, so the immediately preceding set, but I decided if I'm running this in a Game 3 scenario, I want the security of Self-Destruct to prevent bullshit against Zapdos or Tauros or his Snorlax or whatever. And Self-Destruct still has plenty of uses here. It could potentially explode his Chansey to clear the way for my Starmie. It could explode Starmie. If I'm in trouble against it, it could explode his Snorlax if I'm in trouble against it and Gengar slept. And obviously it can explode Tauros and Zapdos to get rid of them. In semifinals, I ran Ice Beam Snorlax on in a Game 2 scenario, but this time it was Game 3, and I wanted boom. Ice Beam on Chansey instead of Seismic Toss. Seismic Toss normally you'd see probably because Executor and Starmie gives enough security against Rhydon to feel okay about it, and Reflect Snorlax can chip it down and paralyze it possibly. But in this case, I wanted Ice Beam. Seismic Toss definitely had a lot of reasons to use still because it hits Starmie much better than Ice Beam, where Ice Beam has a lower PP and obviously only does like 10% instead of 30%. And that was definitely a real consideration because it's another way to kill Starmie or force it out without having to go to my own Starmie. But I felt like Ice Beam was valuable enough to hit his Rhydon, and it also does bluff Thunderbolt somewhat, not completely, but it does bluff Thunderbolt a little bit, so I could still potentially in the earlier mid-game force his Starmie out without having to show that I'm not Thunderbolt, and that would potentially allow me to get a Sing out later if he thinks I am Thunderbolt. And I just thought hitting Rhydon was really, really important in this matchup. Then Tauros is the normal Blizzard and Earthquake set. And there was definitely a lot more thought put into my prep, like in text form and thinking about it, than I've been able to talk about here. Like this is pretty condensed, but hopefully this still gives some insight on how I like to handle things. I will say, well, this is still definitely a difficult task. It was pretty complicated, but things were made a lot easier for me by pretty much already knowing what I wanted one of my three teams to be, and also just the pretty much, I guess, straightforwardness of my opponent's scout. And I figured he would not deviate because he had been using it all tournament. He had been doing pretty well. I knew it was his comfort, and also I did feel a little better because I knew he did not have a whole lot of time during his week. Maybe not the... It was a factor that helped me, I guess. It was just an objective truth that he did not have as much time as I did to necessarily figure out his teams, and he'd be more inclined to use his comfort. And I'm going to use anything I could get in SPL finals. Now on to actually reviewing the games. One second. Okay, so this is game 1. This was on Saturday, April 1st. That's when this set was played at I believe it was my 11 a.m. 1 second. No, it was at 10 a.m. My 10 a.m. So let's get into it. Let me actually put this on fast. I guess I'll put it on. It's not too loud. I think that should be good. I have a better idea. Just turn this down. Okay, sorry. Anyways, so at the gate we have Starmie versus Jinx. I was pretty happy with that. I was expecting Magdon from the rest of his team. That pretty much informed my how I play the entire game, because he mostly used Starmie with lead with Magdon. There were some exceptions like Zapdos or maybe a Cloyster here or there, but for the most part it was right on last, and I figured I would need to prepare for that. He brings in his Chansey to take the Blizzard and try to Seismic Toss my Jinx and Click Sting. So I just wanted to click Blizzard a few times, try and pull for a freeze. I'll click Rest here, essentially just trying to Rest Loop it. So here I made a mistake. I went Chansey trying to catch his Thunder Wave on my Jinx Wake Up, but the problem is, if he just clicks Sing here, expecting something like that, then I'm really screwed. And even him clicking Seismic Toss still is not amazing for me, because I'm kind of forced to go back to Jinx needing to Seismic Toss again. Or he did Sing rather, so that was at least something my way. So my Jinx picks up, he does Seismic Toss because he doesn't want my Chansey, me bringing my Chansey immediately back in to take Thunder Wave like I just tried. What would have been better for me to try this, to switch out to Chansey line, would be to wait for my Jinx to wake up first. End up clicking Seismic Toss and then instead of Thunder Wave, and then he brings in Tauros on my rest click. I did consider this, I did consider swapping out Chansey, but I felt like, I don't want my Jinx just like dying to Blizzard this Tauros, or going Chansey and him, he just Seismic Tosses again, and then I'm in a pretty bad scenario. So in this case, because my Snorlax did have Earthquake and not Self-Destruct, I felt like I was very pressured to go Starmie here. And then because I already have Sleep on his Starmie, I felt fine just clicking Thunder Wave here. I think this recover was a bit of a blunder, because he ends up clicking Sing and landing. It's not a guarantee for that to happen by any means. It's Sing only has 55% accuracy and he's paralyzed, but I don't think my Starmie being at 100% was valuable enough to give him the free turn to try and Sing me. It would have been better to just go Jinx right away, or at least like click Surf maybe. Because the idea I was going for is I can recover it on this Chansey as it clicks Seismic Toss or paralyzes or misses, trying to, and he ended up just clicking Sing, which is the smart play. I should have just gone Jinx. In this case, I ended up going Snorlax because I knew he would, the likely switch for me would be try to either stay in with my Starmie, try and pull for a Wake Up, or to go Jinx and try and wake that up. And I knew he'd try to punish that with Tauros. Alternatively, he just stays in with his Chansey and clicks Seismic Toss, in which case my Snorlax coming in is still completely fine, especially since I do have Earthquake. So if by whatever reason he's running Seismic Toss, Sing, counter Chansey, then that's still fine. But yeah, that's not really the main consideration. The main consideration is just I can get my Snorlax in for free here, basically. And it's even better if he goes Tauros instead of staying with Chansey. I just got Body Slam off here. Here I Body Slam again. Body Slam again. Try and force it to sleep, just to make sure, because 47% and Reflected can Body Slam once against my Snorlax, so I just wanted to make sure. And here, I didn't want to go right on right away. I wanted to get his Snorlax, try to make it rest again first, and like get it in on the turn it rests instead of a turn after. And my Starmie slept, my Jinx is sleeping also, so I didn't really have the best way to punish the Snorlax. That's why I needed to position Rhydon well. I did end up going Chansey here, because Chansey can paralyze Snorlax, and it can soft boiled loop until Snorlax fully paralyzes, and eventually chip it down a little and force it to sleep again. But I ended up just deciding to Ice Beam because I figured he's not going to let his Snorlax get paralyzed, and even if he does stay in attack, my chance is at 86%. It has enough health. And now his chance is at 63%. There's two main things that can happen. It's either going to Thunder Wave my Snorlax coming in, or it's going to Soft Boiled. Either way, I'm going to bring in my Rhydon. And either way, even if he does, for whatever reason, choose to click Seismic Toss, which he wouldn't, but let's just say he did, my Rhydon is still completely fine against that. He doesn't have Ice Beam, which is pretty great. And I knew he had an Executor, so I clicked Body Slam. It does a little more than Earthquake, and it can also paralyze Executor. Unfortunately, I did not get the paralysis. He made a smart switch going to Chansey. Though, I mean, personally, I would have stayed in with Executor and Stun Sport my Chansey, but him going Chansey does make sense still, because if I bring in my Starmie to try and absorb the Sun Sport before pivoting to Chansey, then he gets a free turn to heal. And here I knew he'd want to either go back to Executor or click Seismic Toss. More likely go back to Executor, probably. Also he could just heal, yeah. So anything from heal, Seismic Toss, go Executor would be fine for my Snorlax here, since I didn't want to give him a free turn with Executor coming into my Rhydon. And here I Earthquaked, because I didn't want his Rhydon coming in, since I expected him to have a Rhydon. I do think Body Slam here probably would have been better, but it still is an okay click. And here, Body Slam because my Snorlax is higher health, and it's better. And here, going Rhydon is fine even if he does not click Rest, because it can take a Body Slam. I figured he probably would not have Earthquake, since I was expecting Meagdon, so I figured his Snorlax would be self-destruct. And if he does Rest, obviously that's pretty good for me. He ended up trying to wake up his Snorlax on my Rhydon. It does. However, boom. Snorlax down. That is extraordinarily good for me. I am looking pretty good. It is far from over, of course. His Tauros is still extremely dangerous, and he's going to get an entry with his Tauros here. But this is looking pretty good for me, because now my Snorlax is very well positioned, and my Tauros is also well positioned. And here I decided to just sack my Jinx. I know I'm not going to get a time to wake up later. And I don't want my Rhydon eating a Blizzard. And I don't want to give up my Sleep Sack Starmie either. I could have gone Chansey, I considered it, but I figured, like, if I get crit by Blizzard, that's really bad, and he could also just Earthquake, and that would be even worse, so Jinx was the safe play. And I don't want to give up more HP on my Snorlax. So here I Earthquake, expecting him to go Rhydon, but we'll say this turn ended up costing me a lot. We'll get to that later. And I figured, like, if he didn't go Rhydon before, he's probably not going to go to it now. So I'm just going to Body Slam and try to lower his Tauros into Hyper Beam range from my Tauros, because Earthquake was not a guarantee to put... Sorry. If I clicked Earthquake again, I would not have a guarantee that his Tauros would be in Hyper Beam range of my own Tauros. That was really important, so I figured I needed to Body Slam now. He ended up critting me. Okay. My Snorlax goes down. I'm not bringing my Tauros. And then his Starmie wakes up without having burnt a single turn right here. Turns asleep at 0. And this really pissed me off. Like, that was extremely lucky for him. Obviously, my Rhydon critting his Snorlax is very fortunate in my way, but I did click Earthquake 3 times, so it's a little more likely, and, like, this was Really, really bad. And I ended up ice beaming, expecting a Rhydon to come in. This was probably a bad move for me, but also Executor coming in something. But I figured he would not let his. I mean, this was probably a bad move because like he wants to heal his Starmie, right? But I don't necessarily regret this click, but it's a hard turn for sure. Fortunately, for Chad, he healed his Chansey, so I get the free click with Rhydon, but I do not paralyze the Executor with Body Slam. Drains for whatever reason, I guess expecting me to go Rhydon on an explosion. This was also bad for me right here because I just Ice Beamed the Executor. I needed to soft boiled my Chansey or click Thunder Wave, but I didn't. And so he ended up calling out my double switch to Starmie and going Executor, which was pretty smart from him since I need my Tauros unparalyzed pretty much. But fortunately for me, he Mega Drained, so I get to go to my own Tauros without taking too much. And I call out that he's going to stay in here. Because if I Body Slam into his Starmie and he gets paralyzed, that'll be really bad for him. That means I'm probably winning the game, or close to. Especially if he has Rhydon or Zapdos. And he can still go to his Starmie to revenge kill my Tauros and force a lot, even if I do Hyper Beam the Executor. And so I felt like I kind of had to Hyper Beam here. Ended up getting Call Right. Fortunately, I did paralyze the Starmie with this Body Slam finally. I ended up clicking Body Slam like 3 or 4 times without paralyzing before this, twice on Executor with Rhydon, and once on the Starmie on the wake up turn. But fortunately, I got it here, and if I didn't get it, I probably would have lost straight up. And I ended up going to my own Rhydon because I feel like he's either going to try to catch the Hyper Beam with his Rhydon, or if he does happen to stay in and like Psychic or whatever, okay, sure, my Rhydon can take a hit. But fortunately for me, he ended up bringing out his Zapdos to catch the Hyper Beam. And that's extremely good for me because Rhydon bullies Zapdos. So I end up substituting Body Slam, no paralysis. Crit, Drill Peck breaks the substitute. Body Slam again, no paralysis. Body Slam again, no paralysis. Another crit Drill Peck. Another crit Drill. This was a pretty unlucky sequence for me. You could argue that this rest click right here was incorrect, and it's probably true to some degree, but I don't know, I felt like the game was probably coming down to 50-50 at this point anyways with how poorly that sequence right there went. Brings us his Tauros, Earthquakes as I wake up, and now this is pretty bad because if you look right here, I could stay in and Earthquake his Tauros, but it does not kill without a crit unless I get like an extremely high roll, if even, I don't remember, but and this goes back to, I believe it was turn 34. The Earthquake with Snorlax onto his Tauros. This right here. If I Body Slammed the Tauros instead of Earthquaking, this Tauros right here is in range of Rhydon Earthquake, either completely or most of its rolls. However, as you can see, it's not. So I still need to win a speed tie with Tauros, my Tauros regardless. Either that or crit with Earthquake again. So here I just end up going with Starmie, try to pull for a wake up. Because I knew he would not be able to go to his Starmie without risking mine waking up and just winning, or going Zapdos and just giving Rhydon a free in again. Go to my Tauros, and he Blizzarded, which was smart. I regret not hyper beaming there. I mean, obviously there's some hindsight because I knew, because he ended up blizzarding, but I still think that, you know, even if he does hyper beam here, which is unlikely. Actually, it's a hard turn, I guess. If he hyper beams here, I click Earthquake with my Rhydon, and I did not get crit by his next blizzard. Or I did not get crit by his next blizzard, otherwise it reverts to the same 50-50. And I figured, okay, I'm going to try to pull for that and try to hedge my bets a little. But for him, that's such an obvious thing for me to do because I'm going to use every piece of material I have to try to increase my chances of winning. So he's going to try to go for Blizzard. And if I just Hyper Beam with Tauros here, the game is over. Blizzard does not miss again. Earthquake, and as you see, it does not kill. Blizzard again doesn't miss. And now it's back to a speed tie. It's slightly more favored for me because he has to land a Hyper Beam while I just have to hit Body Slam, so it's really like, I don't know, like 52-48, but still, it's basically a tie. And if I win the speed tie, I almost certainly win. It's not guaranteed I have to land 2 more Hyper Beams, but I likely win. And so we're just gonna watch it play out. That's the only thing left to do. I lose. And that Earthquake with Snorlax right here on this right here. This click lost me the game. And I regret it a lot, of course. Because if I didn't do that, I won. He did get, of course, some luck with the Starmie Wake Up on turn 1. Without that, I think I probably won. But, you know, what can you do, right? And so I'm down 0-1, and I need to win 2 in a row to win this set, and this is pretty bad. Game 2, I'm loading up the Gar-Jinx Me Zap team, and I'm expecting a Jinx from him, or rather, hoping for a Jinx from him, and just going with the flow. Gengar versus Jinx. That is incredible for me. I am very, very, very happy. Because, boom, gone. So he made a smart call here, sending out Tauros on the Revenge, expecting, or to account for a Jinx send out. Because, like I said, I brought as you saw, I brought Gar-Jinx into him back in week 1. And so he was definitely had it in mind. However, I did not want to risk this right here, because Tauros actually has like a 40% chance of just outright beating Jinx in a scenario like this by clicking Body Slam. Lovely Kiss can miss, that's 25%. Body Slam can paralyze, and you get fully paralyzed. That's a possibility. That's like 30% times 25%, but still very real. And Body Slam could crit, and that's also really, really bad. And I did not want to risk that when I knew he was likely using Jinx solo sleep, and I just wanted to save my Jinx and guarantee sleep later. So I sent in my Snorlax. And for whatever reason, he blizzards. I guess he tried to. It's not like terrible. It could crit my Snorlax, it could freeze it, but he ended up missing. And even if it did miss, even if he did not miss, it only does like 20%. And so I get a free Body Slam on his Tauros, basically. And now he's forced out. And I reflect here, and he reflects also. And here at this point, I'm just trying to force his Snorlax to sleep so I can get Jinx in. And I have no reason to try and call out the rest turn and switch directly. I want to guarantee I get my sleep. So I Slam here, and then I go Jinx off. Run turn, and goes Chansey. Blizzard, boom, and unfortunately I hit Lovely Kiss, and Chansey is down. And this is looking extremely, extremely good for me. Because he's almost certainly going to have a Starmie, and his last is something like Rhydon or Zapdos, and that's totally fine. And I Body Slam on, expecting the Starmie to come in, and lo and behold, first Body Slam paralysis, and that's incredible. So So I just Blizzard trying to trip Starmie a little, because I know he's going to Thunder Wave here likely, and I want to weaken his Starmie to get one of my Pokemon in safely, likely Snorlax. I probably could have gone Snorlax here, but I felt like he'd consider Thunder Waving. It's probably still correct to go Snorlax there. And now here, I knew he'd definitely have to recover or Thunder Wave. And even if he did Thunder Wave, it's still okay because his Starmie's only at 49. That's very low. And Body Slamming, he Thunder Waves. And here, I could have Body Slammed again. I ended up deciding to self-destruct. Body Slam, he recovers, he goes up to 60, Body Slam brings him back down to like 25 or something. But I did not want his Starmie recover looping my Snorlax. I wanted to get it out of the way. He ended up paralyzing anyway, so Body Slam would have been better because that allows me to keep my Snorlax, but I wanted to make sure his Starmie was gone. That was the only thing really preventing me from winning with my Psychic and Blizzard Starmie. So I send out my Tauros to his 69% Tauros, and so I'm very favored here. Blizzards does not freeze or crit, and I just Hyper Beam raw because I know he can't really take it with anything. Chansey's sleeping, his Snorlax is too low health, and he needed to try to go for something. He needed to try and hope I Body Slammed, expecting something else to try to come in and take the Hyper Beam. So I just Hyper Beamed, and I was very, very ahead anyway, so even if something did absorb the Hyper Beam, it's still totally fine. Body Slam, crit. Here I Hyper Beamed. It was probably incorrect. It's better to Blizzard here. If something like a Zapdos or Rhydon is coming in, you'd rather hit him with Blizzard. And it's just a very small, it's very minor, it just didn't really matter, but Blizzard is a better click than Hyper Beam here, because they both kill Snorlax, and Blizzard is better for hitting like a Rhydon or something. Lo and behold, he does have Rhydon. Blizzard, he does not crit me, and Blizzard again and land. And so I ended up just winning this game, only revealing 4 Pokemon because I got exactly the matchup I wanted. And I was extremely happy with it. And game ended in turn 27, and I hid both Starmie and Zapdos. So I was feeling good. I also hid the fact that I was Chansey-less, which is also extremely good. And so in game 3, like I said, we're just going to hit him with the double Gengar. And lo and behold, he does bring Jinx again, probably expecting me to not. Well, there's a couple reasons. One, it's a comfort team from him. It's pretty safe. It's a comfort thing for him to use Jinx. It's fairly safe, and it's secure. Yeah. And the other thing is, I just used Gengar in Game 2. Another one coming out directly after in Game 3 is not the most likely. It's possible, of course, but the likelihood is generally reduced. However, I accounted for this. In my prep, I'm going to bring a Gengar again, because he's been using too much Jinx, and I need to punish him for that. And I get the matchup. And Hypnosis, he does not end up deciding to switch out to his Starmie or something to take an explosion, but that's still fine because I still land the Hypnosis. Nightshade. And here he doesn't end up going Starmie, expecting me to explode Gengar on his Chansey. However, I figured, like, I'm not really under too much pressure to do that right now, and I don't want to give away my Gengar for free, so I'm not going to let that happen. I'm just going to Nightshade again. And then he Thunder Waves. Ice Beam, because he's afraid of Thunder Wave. And I don't want, and the reason, well, obviously my Chansey cannot hurt his Jinx, right? So I'm probably going to go Tauros here to punish his Jinx for trying to burn turns. However, his response to that is, I'm going to go Snorlax. Either way, he's going to Ice Beam it, he's going to Thunderbolt and I get my Tauros, he's either going to Thunderbolt and I get my Snorlax in without taking too much, or he's going to bring in Tauros, which is likelier, and get my Snorlax in completely for free. And I'm like, I don't want that happening, and so I'm going to go to my Snorlax. It's still a good punish to his Jinx. And I reflect, see Body Slams. and I go Executor on the rest turn. Psychic, and then end up critting his Chansey, which is pretty good. Yeah, it keeps it lower, and then I stun Spore his Chansey. Go to Snorlax on the soft boiled. Ended up clicking Reflect here because I don't want my Snorlax getting countered. I don't have Earthquake on this team. I don't have Ice Beam, anything like that. I only have Body Slam and Self-Destruct. So I'm going to Reflect and hope he does, and try to call out the counter. However, he paralyzes. I'm like, I can't be sure what he's going to do now. Is if he Thunder Waved or not, or if he countered or whatever. So I'm like, I have a Starmie in the back with Surf and Thunderbolt. He has Jinx Solo Sleep, and his Starmie is chipped, and his Snorlax is sleeping with 0 turns burnt. I'm going to get rid of the Chansey and help my Starmie win the game. Go Executor. I don't want to get hit by Blizzard because I don't know what a Starmie set is. So I just go Chansey. And here, I think this Ice Beam was incorrect. It's an okay play, but the better play here would be to go to Executor. Because he revealed Surf. He does use Surf Blizzard some, but if he has, in this case, he mostly uses Surf Blizzard. If he has Jinx lead with a Surf Blizzard Starmie, the last is always Cloister from him. And it's probably not that team, for one, because he runs Earthquake, Self-Destruct, Rest, Snorlax, no Reflect, and in this game, clearly he's running Reflect, but even if he was using Reflect on that team, I'm still totally fine, because my Surf Thunderbolt Starmie is going to, like, annihilate him. So the better play would just be go to Executor, and assume he has Surf Bolt, and try to, it also calls out the Snorlax switch. And pressures much more directly. Then here I go Gengar. I Nightshade because I don't want to Psychic and let him know right away that Starmie can come in. However, I do think Nightshade was fine, but there's definitely a consideration for Psychic still here because like me Nightshading kind of shows I don't have Thunderbolt anyways because Thunderbolt does more to Snorlax than it can crit. But I figured like I don't want to show him my moveset, right? Like not directly, like make him think about it at least. Psychic is still again has an argument, it can crit, it can special drop, and that's pretty good. But I end up just Nightshading. And here I figured like, oh, okay, if he's staying in with Snorlax, he probably, or like actually just in general, like his Snorlax is at 63%. I don't want my Gengar getting Earthquaked. So I went back to Executor on the Earthquake click. Paralyze, unfortunately. He reflects. However, fortunately this turn, I do paralyze. And the reason I say fortunately is because this turn actually clicked Explosion, trying to take out his Snorlax from 63%. Or close to. I don't remember the roll. He makes a smart move and reflects to call that out. However, again, like I said, fortunately I do actually paralyze. And so, next turn, I just Psychic. He low rolls Body Slam. And I explode. And bring his Snorlax down to 2%. And he has to make a call here. He's pretty much forced to let the Snorlax die. The reason I say pretty much forced is because if he lets Jinx die, I have 2 other sleepers, and he knows I have sleep on at least one of them, Gengar. He doesn't know I have sync on Chansey, but still, that just makes it even better for me. So he can't really stack Jinx. He can't really go Starmie either, because it's at 70%. So taking a Body Slam from Tauros would be extremely risky, because if I get the paralysis, it's just dead. And the reason killing Snorlax is good for me is because I still have my Chansey paralyzed. Unfortunately here I paralyze, I believe I clicked Ice Beam? I don't know, whatever. If I clicked, I don't remember which move I clicked, if it was Ice Beam or Thunder Wave, but either way, I would have preferred, obviously, to not paralyze. And then this turn I definitely preferred to not paralyze, because this turn I definitely did click Ice Beam, expecting a Rhydon to come in and punish the soft-boiled. And that chip on Tauros would have been very nice to have, but whatever. And here I go Gengar, because either he's Body Slamming or he's Hyper Beaming. My chance is at 68%, Hyper Beam is not a guaranteed roll, but I can paralyze, he can crit, And obviously he can just hit the roll, and that would be really, really bad. I need my Chansey. Or I feel like I needed my Chansey. And I don't want to just let him Hyper Beam for free. And then go Starmie on the Earthquake, because I can get my Starmie in pretty easily here without taking too much and force it a lot. Thunder Wave, expecting his Starmie to come in or his Tauros to stay in. He goes right on it, and here I know he's not just going to let us give up his Rhydon for free to a Surf or a Blizzard crit / freeze, or even just a regular Blizzard and it takes like 80. So what I decided to do here is I'm going to call him out on his Starmie switch. Yes, he could stay in an Earthquake or Body Slam me, and that would be pretty bad. He'd probably Body Slam if he stayed in. But I don't think he's just going to give away his Rhydon for free when I have a fully healthy Gengar, and he does not know I don't have Thunderbolt. So, I Thunderbolt, and crit. And now all I need to do is win one speed tie and the Starmie is dead. And even if I lose the speed tie, my Starmie gets paralyzed and his Starmie is dead, or he recovers and... Or he'd click Thunder Wave if he didn't no, he just would click Thunder Wave. Sorry, I'm misspeaking. But yeah, best case, I win the speed tie, I kill the Starmie, game over. Worst case, I get paralyzed, his Starmie's dead. Still. However, then that really, really, really sucked. This turn right here, again, paralyzed. I clicked Thunderbolt again. Would have brought his Starmie down to like 20, or sorry, it would have brought his Starmie down to like 10 or 15 again, and I could get a turn to Thunder Wave it. Unfortunately, did not happen. And he did actually have Thunderbolt, so he was actually running Surf Thunderbolt. Fortunately, I click Thunderbolt, and I win the speed tie, and I crit him actually, so the Starmie's dead. It would have been okay even if I didn't crit, because my Tauros can just revenge kill it, but it makes it even better because that means there's no funky business with potentially it healing on Chansey later. You could argue that this line was incorrect, and I should have gone Chansey instead of Thunder Waving here on turn 36. But I really felt like I needed his Starmie dead. I was pretty desperate, honestly. So, and I still feel like it's not a strictly incorrect play to make there, but you could argue that going Chansey was better. But fortunately, or quote unquote fortunately, I won the tie and created a Starmie, and it died. Obviously, I would have much preferred my Starmie not lose the speed tie than get fully paralyzed twice in a row, but what can you do? And he brings in his Tauros to revenge kill my Starmie, and I go Gengar actually, because I want to save my Starmie as a sack. He cannot really Earthquake here, because I can just stay in recover, or sorry, no, I can stay in and Thunder Wave his Tauros, and on the Earthquake, unless he has to crit or fully paralyze me for that to happen. So I feel like he's not gonna Earthquake here, he's gonna Body Slam. And I want to keep my Starmie as a sack for later, or to potentially heal on Jinx. So then he Earthquakes, I lose the speed tie, but I do not get crit, and I Psychic, reveal it finally, because at this point, there's no reason not to, and I crit his Tauros. And that's incredible for me, because now it's in range of my Tauros's Hyper Beam. It's also in range of a Blizzard crit, or a Body Slam crit, or 2 Blizzards, or whatever. And then I Psychic again, because it can crit. You could probably argue that I should have Nightshaded here, but it's fine. Reason for Nightshade is that his Tauros is in range of my Tauros's Earthquake and Blizzard, so when I bring in my Tauros to revenge kill his, he cannot go to Rhydon to try and absorb a Hyper Beam. And here, I Psychic again, probably the incorrect move, but I Special Drop him. The reason I Psychic is because I did not want Rhydon coming in on Nightshade or a Starmie swap. Actually, Psychic there was fine, and his Jinx was also only burnt 1 turn to sleep, so a wake up was pretty unlikely. But I Psychic again as it wakes up, Special Drops fortunately, and that way I can go Chansey. Soft Boiled because he cannot really punish that too hard. Worst case he goes Rhydon, assuming I don't fully paralyze. Worst case he goes Rhydon, and he has to pull for paralysis and try to substitute. But even if that does happen, I still have a Gengar that can break the substitute, and then Tauros just usually wins. he switches out to Rhydon on the Thunder Wave. I wouldn't really Ice Beam here. I guess you could argue I could, but I did not really want to Ice Beam into the Jinx, and like if he does stay in, I'd rather just completely eliminate the Tauros basically, rather than risking like some obnoxious luck. And he does not actually go for Substitute, and I'm able to Ice Beam and deal 63% to this Rhydon, and that's really, really good for me. Then I go Gengar. The reason I went Gengar here is, I think this is the objectively correct play here. If I can bring this Rhydon down to close to death, then that means it cannot absorb a Hyper Beam from Tauros when I Hyper Beam his Tauros from 39, or Hyper Beam his Jinx from 63. And I did not really need my Gengar anymore at this point. Going Tauros here to click Blizzard would just let him sack Jinx, and I'd have to like risk losing 2 Hyper Beam 50/50s again into his Rhydon. So that would be really, really bad. So just give away my Gengar, force his Rhydon down, so that my Tauros can just win really easily. Quick Psychic. Probably should have Nightshaded here, I'd say, because Nightshade still brings Rhydon down into Hyper Beam range. But I click Psychic, hoping to just like maybe crit the Rhydon or whatever. But I get the drop, so now I'm going to try to use that and just go Starmie, because I wanted to make sure I had Gengar to force this Rhydon into range. Psychic only does 10, and Surf kills from 49 because of the special drop, and also if he tries to bring in Rhydon or Tauros, Surf just obliterates him. And boom, look at that. Then Tauros comes in. And here I go Gengar and Explode. This is probably incorrect. The reason for this is to try and force a little more damage onto his Tauros so that I have to click Hyper Beam one less time. So that I can Body Slam instead of Hyper Beaming. And it's a very small extra percent of win, but extra win percentage, but it mattered, I felt. So I clicked Explosion. So I went Gengar first. If I lose the speed tie, whatever, I still have to land 2 Upper Beams, nothing changes. But if I win speed tie, then that's really good, of course. I ended up exploding instead of clicking Nightshade. Nightshade would have been better, because if he goes Jinx, it still just outright kills Jinx, but and then I get to retry the speed tie into Tauros, but ended up exploding. Felt like, okay, if he's going to stay in with Tauros and I win the speed tie, I'd want to just kill it outright. But Nightshade would have been better because it accomplishes the same thing and I still have to hit 1 Hyper Beam. I guess in either way, if he switches, Jinx is dead, right? And that's what matters more. But, And then I have 100% Tauros against his 39% Tauros. I am overwhelmingly favored. He has to go for Blizzard and Freeze. He has to win the speed tie or dodge Hyper Beam for that to happen. And I just win the speed tie outright, and boom. Game over. And I win the set, coming back from down 0-1 to winning 2-1. I'm not going to say my play was perfect, and like I said, I made a few mistakes, of course. The Earthquake with Snorlax in Game 1 was definitely the worst mistake I made this set, and one of the worst mistakes I've made in a bit. And, of course, I have a lot of regrets about it, but I ended up winning the set anyways, and I learned to not do that, of course. So, all's well that ends well. And, I just hope that was helpful. Yeah, I just hope it was helpful to see my thought processes when prepping and when playing. And I hope you're able to learn something. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for watching.